The panties were black lace, size small, definitely not mine. I found them tucked into the corner of our linen closet behind the spare pillowcases. Not hidden exactly, but not visible either. The kind of placement that suggested carelessness rather than deliberate concealment. My hands trembled as I held them, not because I was shocked. By that point, I'd suspected for months, but because this was proof. Tangible, undeniable proof. I took a photo with my phone. Then I carefully folded them and put them back exactly where I'd found them. My husband, Marcus, thought I was stupid, trusting, too naive to see what was happening right in front of me. He was wrong. I saw everything. I just chose silence, temporarily, because I was building something, collecting evidence, preparing for the moment when my silence would transform into a voice so loud the whole world would hear it. Marcus had no idea what was coming. Up Chapter 1. The marriage that wasn't our marriage had been dying for years before I found those panties. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. Marcus and I met when I was 26 and he was 30. I was finishing my graduate degree in journalism, working nights at a local newspaper. He was already established, a successful financial consultant with a corner office and expensive suits. He swept me off my feet, literally. I spilled coffee on him at a networking event, and instead of being angry, he'd laughed and asked me to dinner. We married a year later. It felt like a fairy tale. The struggling journalist and the successful businessman, building a life together. For the first 5 years, we were happy, or I thought we were happy. Marcus worked long hours, but he was attentive when he was home. We had inside jokes. We hosted dinner parties. We talked about having kids someday. Then something shifted. It started small. Marcus began working even later. Business trips became more frequent. His phone was suddenly password protected. He was distracted, distant, always somewhere else even when he was sitting right next to me. "Work is crazy right now," he'd say whenever I asked about it. "Just a stressful period. It'll calm down soon." It never calmed down. I tried everything to reconnect. Romantic dinners he'd cancel at the last minute. Weekend getaways he'd postpone. Conversations about our future that he'd deflect. "Can we talk about this later?" became his favorite phrase. "I'm too tired right now." Later never came. I started investigating on my own. Not because I wanted to find evidence of an affair. I genuinely hoped I'd find nothing. That I was being paranoid. That everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. I found credit card charges at restaurants we'd never been to. Hotel rooms in cities where he claimed to have stayed with clients. Gifts purchased that I'd never received. I found text messages to a contact labeled J. Morrison client that were decidedly not professional. "Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? My wife is asking questions. We need to be more careful." My wife. That's what I'd become to him. Not Caroline, not Honey, not the woman he'd promised to love and cherish. Just my wife. An obstacle to manage. I should have confronted him then. Should have demanded answers. Insisted on couples therapy, given him an ultimatum. But I didn't. Because by then, I'd started to see Marcus clearly for the first time. And I realized something important. He thought he was smarter than me, more sophisticated, better at deception. He thought I'd never figure it out. And if I did, I'd never have the courage to do anything about it. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront him. I was going to document everything, build an airtight case. And when the time was right, I was going to expose him in a way he'd never see coming. Chapter 2. The Divorce. Marcus asked for a divorce on a Tuesday evening in March. He'd come home from work, poured himself a scotch, and said it without preamble. "I want a divorce." I looked up from my laptop where I'd been working on an article. "What?" "I'm not happy, Caroline. I haven't been happy for a long time. This marriage isn't working anymore." The words I'd been expecting for months, but hearing them still felt like a punch to the chest. "Is there someone else?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "No, this isn't about anyone else. This is about us not being compatible anymore." A lie. I had 6 months of evidence proving otherwise, but I nodded like I believed him. "Okay," I said quietly. He looked surprised. I think he'd expected tears, begging, drama. "Okay, that's it? What do you want me to say, Marcus? If you're not happy, you're not happy. I'm not going to beg you to stay." Relief flooded his face. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. I think we can handle this maturely, maybe even stay friends. Friends. With the man who'd been cheating on me for at least 6 months. Sure. I've already spoken to a lawyer, he continued. Given how much I earn compared to you, and the fact that most of our assets are in my name, I think the fairest approach is for me to keep the house and investments. I'll give you $50,000 as a settlement. That should be enough to get you started somewhere new. $50,000. For 10 years of marriage. For the career opportunities I'd sacrificed to support his. For the life we'd built together. What about the rental properties? I asked. We owned 3, purchased with money from both of us, though titled only in his name because he said it was better for taxes. Those are mine. They're in my name, and I've been managing them. I contributed to the down payments. I know. That's why I'm being generous with the settlement. $50,000 is more than fair, Caroline. You should take it. The threat was implicit. Take what I'm offering, or I'll make this ugly. Most women in my position would have hired their own lawyer, would have fought for half of everything, would have exposed his affair to get a better settlement. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I agreed to his terms, signed the papers he put in front of me, accepted the $50,000 settlement that was a fraction of what I deserved. Marcus was thrilled. He'd gotten everything he wanted. The house, the properties, the investments, his freedom, with minimal cost and no drama. I'm really glad we could do this amicably, he said when we signed the final papers. You're being so mature about this, Caroline. I appreciate it. I smiled and said nothing, because Marcus had no idea what I was planning. He thought my silence meant acceptance, resignation, defeat. He was wrong. My silence was strategic. I was giving him enough rope to hang himself. Chapter 3. The notebook. I'd been keeping a notebook since the first time I suspected Marcus was cheating. Not a journal, a detailed chronological record of evidence, dates, times, screenshots of texts, credit card statements, photos, everything organized, indexed, cross-referenced. The notebook itself was unremarkable, a plain black composition book purchased from a drugstore for $1.99. But its contents were explosive. I started it 3 months before I found the panties, back when I'd noticed the first real red flags. Marcus coming home with his collar buttoned wrong, the smell of unfamiliar perfume, explanations that didn't quite add up. The first entry was simple. March 3rd. Marcus said he'd be working late, but I called his office at 8 p.m. and he wasn't there. His secretary seemed confused when I asked for him, said he'd left at 5:30 p.m. Where was he for those 2.5 hours? That led to more observations. March 10th. Found receipt in his jacket pocket for dinner at Marcello's. $287. I've never been to Marcello's. When I asked about work dinners, he said he'd been eating cheap takeout all week. March 15th. Marcus's phone rang while he was in the shower. Caller ID. J. Morrison, client. I almost answered but decided to wait. When he saw the missed call, his face went pale for just a second before he composed himself. Each entry was careful, factual, unemotional. I documented what I saw, what I heard, what I could verify. I didn't write about my feelings. Those could be dismissed as hysteria, as jealousy, as a wife looking for problems. But facts? Facts were undeniable. I worked on the notebook in coffee shops where Marcus would never find me. There was a little place called Café Reverie 3 miles from our house, tucked into a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation office. Not trendy, not memorable. Perfect. I'd go there after work, order a black coffee, and spend an hour updating my entries, organizing receipts, downloading credit card statements, cross-referencing dates and locations. The barista, a young woman with purple hair named Maya, eventually got curious. Research project? She asked one day, glancing at my spread of papers and highlighters. Something like that? I said. Must be intense. You look like you're hunting war criminals. Close enough. She laughed, thinking I was joking. I kept the notebook in a safety deposit box at a bank across town, not our usual bank where Marcus might somehow access it, but a small credit union I'd joined specifically for this purpose. Every week, I'd visit during my lunch break, update the physical notebook, and back up everything to an encrypted cloud account using a laptop Marcus didn't know I owned. Paranoid? Maybe. But Marcus was smart. I needed to be smarter. By the time we divorced, My documentation was comprehensive. The affair timeline. I'd traced the affair back 9 months to a company retreat in Napa Valley. That's where it had started, based on the sudden uptick in texts to Jay Morrison and the change in Marcus's behavior immediately after. I had 247 text messages between Marcus and Julia, recovered from our cell phone account's online portal before Marcus thought to hide them. Credit card charges at restaurants, hotels, and boutiques. Always on days Julia's calendar showed she was out of office. I'd befriended her assistant, casually asking about Julia's schedule for coordination purposes. Calendar entries that matched up suspiciously. Marcus's client dinner nights were Julia's personal evening blocks. Photos from social media that, when examined closely, showed them in the same locations on the same days, even when Marcus claimed to be in different cities. The financial deception. Marcus had been moving money for months, thinking I wouldn't notice. 3 new bank accounts opened in his name only, totaling $187,000, found through his email, which still logged in automatically on our shared iPad. Regular transfers from our joint account to his private accounts, always under $5,000 to avoid. Triggering alerts, credit cards I didn't know about, with charges for furniture and household items, setting up a love nest, I realized. Withdrawals from our retirement accounts with forged signatures that looked like mine. I'd discovered this when reviewing our financial statements. He'd gotten sloppy. The evidence of intimacy. This was the hardest part to document, but the most crucial. Hotel receipts for rooms with king beds and champagne charges. Jewelry purchases that I never received. I tracked down the boutique and confirmed the pieces were sized for someone with much smaller fingers than mine. A Valentine's Day bouquet delivery to an address that wasn't our home. The florist's records showed it had been sent to Julia's apartment. And yes, the panties. The black lace panties that Julia had been careless enough to leave in our house, tucked into our linen closet like they belonged there. I documented everything about those panties with forensic precision. Photographs from every angle with date stamps, measurements. I used a ruler, documenting waist and leg openings. Brand identification, La Perla, specifically the Tres Sofas line. Purchase records. The boutique downtown kept meticulous records. Julia had bought 3 pairs on February 14th, Valentine's Day, for $245 each. But I also visited that boutique. Showed the photo to the saleswoman, an elegant woman in her 60s named Francesca. I'm trying to return these, I lied smoothly. A gift that didn't work out. I don't have the receipt, but I'm hoping you keep records. Francesca looked at the photo, then at me with eyes that had seen too many similar situations. We do keep records, she said carefully, but these were purchased by a different customer, a younger woman with dark hair. She was quite specific about wanting this style in black. Do you remember when? February 14th. She was buying them for a special occasion, she said. Very excited. Valentine's Day. The same day Marcus had told me he was too busy with work to celebrate. The same day he'd come home at midnight, claiming an emergency client meeting. Would you be willing to provide documentation of that purchase? I asked. I'm gathering evidence for a divorce. Francesca's expression softened. I thought it might be something like that. Yes, honey. I'll print you a copy of the receipt, and if you need testimony, you call me. I added that receipt to my notebook, another nail in Marcus's coffin. Every piece of evidence I gathered was another layer of protection, because I knew how men like Marcus operated. They denied. They gaslit. They made their wives sound crazy, vindictive, unstable. She's imagining things, they said. She's always been paranoid. She can't accept that I just fell out of love with her. But I had facts, dates, receipts, screenshots, testimony from third parties. You can't gaslight someone who has evidence. I worked on this notebook for 6 months. 6 months of careful documentation while maintaining the facade of the oblivious wife. 6 months of smiling at dinner parties while Julia stood across the room, probably wearing the panties my husband had bought her. 6 months of sleeping next to Marcus while knowing he was texting her goodnight after I fell asleep. It was exhausting, soul-crushing. There were nights I wanted to throw the notebook at his head and scream until he admitted everything. But I didn't, because screaming would have felt good for 5 minutes. What I was building would matter forever. My sister Rachel was the only person who knew about the notebook. She'd found me crying at Cafe Reverie one evening, surrounded by credit card statements and text message screenshots. "What is all this?" she'd asked. I told her everything. "Why don't you just confront him?" she asked. "Why do this to yourself?" "Because confronting him gives him power. He'll lie. He'll manipulate. He'll turn it around on me, make me the problem." I gestured at my evidence. "But this is the truth. Documented. Undeniable. And when I'm ready to speak, it will be on my terms, not his. You're building a case. I'm building a weapon." Rachel understood then. She'd been through her own bad divorce, her own experience of being gaslit and dismissed. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. "I don't know yet. But when the time is right, Marcus is going to regret underestimating me." I meant it, every word, because Marcus thought I was weak, naive, too trusting to see what was right in front of me. He thought wrong. Chapter 4. Julia. I researched Julia Morrison the way I'd research any story subject. Thoroughly, carefully, looking for the truth beneath the surface. She was 34, 3 years younger than me, beautiful in that polished, professional way. Sleek hair, designer clothes, perfect makeup. She'd graduated from an Ivy League business school. She'd been with Marcus's firm for 4 years. On social media, she presented herself as ambitious, successful, driven. She posted about business conferences and charity galas. She shared motivational quotes about success and determination. She never mentioned Marcus. They were careful about that, but I found the connections anyway. Photos from company events where they stood just a little too close. Comments on each other's posts that seemed innocuous but had an undercurrent of intimacy if you knew what to look for. "Great presentation today. You're brilliant. Marcus. Learned from the best. Julia." I wondered if she knew about me, if Marcus had told her he was married, if she cared. I got my answer when I found an old blog post of hers from 2 years ago, before the affair started, based on my timeline. The post was about ethics in business, about how success means nothing if it's built on lies and betrayal, about how she'd never compromise her integrity for anything. The irony was almost funny, but what really struck me was a line near the end. I watched my mother stay with my father despite his affairs, watched her dignity erode year by year. I promised myself I'd never be that woman, and I'd never be the other woman either. So she knew. She knew Marcus was married. She knew I existed. And she'd made a choice. A choice that, apparently, her principles didn't matter when it came to what she wanted. I saved the blog post, added it to my growing collection of evidence. People love a hypocrite, especially a self-righteous one. Chapter 5. Moving on. I moved out of the house 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Marcus had already moved Julia in. I knew because I'd driven by one night and seen her car in the driveway, her silhouette moving past the upstairs window, our bedroom window. I didn't tell Marcus I knew. I just packed my things, hired movers, and left. He'd offered to help me move, which would have been laughable if it weren't so insulting. I declined politely. I found a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, a 1-bedroom in an older building, but it was affordable, and it was mine. After years of living in Marcus's showpiece house, following his aesthetic preferences, maintaining his standards, the modest apartment felt like freedom. I got a job at a mid-sized publication, not prestigious, but stable. They let me write the investigative pieces I loved. My editor, Diane, was sharp and no-nonsense, and reminded me why I'd loved journalism in the first place. "You're good at this," she said after I turned in my 3rd article. "Really good. Why'd you take so much time off?" "Supporting my husband's career," I said. She snorted. "Let me guess. He's your ex now? Finalized 3 months ago. Good. Men like that never deserve the women who sacrifice for them." I smiled but said nothing, because Diane had no idea what I was planning. Nobody did. I was living my quiet life, working my modest job, inhabiting my small apartment. To everyone who knew me, I was the picture of a woman moving on with dignity. No drama, no bitterness, just acceptance. Marcus certainly thought so. He'd reached out a few times, casual texts checking how I was doing, asking if I needed anything, playing the role of the concerned ex-husband. "I hope you're settling in okay. Let me know if you need any help." Saw your article in the paper. Nice work. Hope there are no hard feelings. I think we both made the right choice. I responded politely, briefly, maintaining the facade of the amicable divorce. Meanwhile, I was working on something else, something bigger, a story, the one that would expose everything. I worked on it in the early mornings before my job, late at night after work, on weekends when I should have been sleeping or socializing or trying to rebuild my life. This was rebuilding my life. This story was my foundation, my purpose, my revenge, but it wasn't ready yet. I needed one more piece. I needed Marcus to think he'd won, to think he'd gotten away with everything. So I waited, patient, quiet, invisible, gathering my strength for the moment when I'd finally speak. Chapter 6. The Proposal. A year after our divorce, Marcus got engaged to Julia. I learned about it from social media. Julia posted a photo of her hand displaying a massive diamond ring, caption gushing about finding her soulmate, about how love conquers all, about starting there forever. The comments were predictable. Friends and colleagues congratulating them. Exclamations about the beautiful ring, heart emojis and wedding dress emojis and champagne emojis. Nobody mentioned that Marcus had been married before, that this wasn't his first promise of forever. Or maybe they knew and didn't care. I stared at that photo for a long time, at Julia's perfectly manicured hand, at the ring that probably cost more than my entire year's rent, at the happiness radiating from every pixel, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not jealousy, not even satisfaction that my plan was falling into place. Just a cold, clear certainty that it was time. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I'd been working on for a year. 50,000 words, meticulously researched, carefully written, every fact checked and double-checked, every screenshot included, every timeline verified, every quote confirmed. The title was simple: The Other Woman's Underwear, How My Husband's Betrayal Taught Me the Price of Silence. It was part memoir, part investigation, part exposé. It told the story of my marriage, the affair, the divorce, but it also told a bigger story, about how men like Marcus manipulate and gaslight, about how women are conditioned to stay silent, about the cost of speaking up and the greater cost of staying quiet. And it named names: Marcus Reynolds, Julia Morrison, their employer, Harrison Financial Group. It included the panties, photos of them, documentation of where I found them, the receipt from the boutique proving Julia had purchased them. It included everything. I sent it to Diane. She called me 10 minutes later. "Caroline, what is this?" "It's a story. It's a nuclear bomb. You're naming your ex-husband, his girlfriend, their employer. You're making serious allegations. They're not allegations. They're facts. Everything is documented. I have proof of every single claim." Silence on the other end. Then, "Let me read it again. All of it. I'll call you tomorrow." She called the next day. "This is the best thing you've ever written. It's raw, and it's painful, and it's absolutely devastating. But Caroline, are you sure? Once this is out there, you can't take it back." "I'm sure. They'll come after you. Marcus will sue for defamation. So will Julia. The firm will try to discredit you. Let them. I have documentation for everything. Texts, emails, credit card statements, photos, timelines. I've been building this case for 18 months. They can't discredit the truth." Another pause. "Okay, I'll take it to the publisher. But Caroline, you're brave as hell." I wasn't brave. I was done being silent. Chapter 6. The Proposal. A year after our divorce, Marcus got engaged to Julia. I learned about it from social media. Julia posted a photo of her hand displaying a massive diamond ring, caption gushing about finding her soulmate, about how love conquers all, about starting there forever. The comments were predictable: friends and colleagues congratulating them, exclamations about the beautiful ring, heart emojis and wedding dress emojis and champagne emojis. Nobody mentioned that Marcus had been married before, that this wasn't his first promise of forever, or maybe they knew and didn't care. I stared at that photo for a long time, at Julia's perfectly manicured hand, at the ring that probably cost more than my entire year's rent, at the happiness radiating from every pixel, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not jealousy, Not even satisfaction that my plan was falling into place. Just a cold, clear certainty that it was time. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I'd been working on for a year. 50,000 words. Meticulously researched. Carefully written. Every fact checked and double-checked. Every screenshot included. Every timeline verified. Every quote confirmed. The title was simple. The Other Woman's Underwear. How My Husband's Betrayal Taught Me the Price of Silence. It was part memoir, part investigation, part exposé. It told the story of my marriage, the affair, the divorce, but it also told a bigger story about how men like Marcus manipulate and gaslight, about how women are conditioned to stay silent, about the cost of speaking up and the greater cost of staying quiet. And it named names: Marcus Reynolds, Julia Morrison, their employer, Harrison Financial Group. It included the panties, photos of them, documentation of where I found them, the receipt from the boutique proving Julia had purchased them. It included everything. I sent it to Diane. She called me 10 minutes later. "Caroline, what is this?" "It's a story. It's a nuclear bomb. You're naming your ex-husband, his girlfriend, their employer. You're making serious allegations. They're not allegations, they're facts. Everything is documented. I have proof of every single claim." Silence on the other end. Then, "Let me read it again, all of it. I'll call you tomorrow." She called the next day. "This is the best thing you've ever written. It's raw, and it's painful, and it's absolutely devastating. But Caroline, are you sure? Once this is out there, you can't take it back." "I'm sure. They'll come after you. Marcus will sue for defamation. So will Julia. The firm will try to discredit you. Let them. I have documentation for everything. Texts, emails, credit card statements, photos, timelines. I've been building this case for 18 months. They can't discredit the truth." Another pause. "Okay, I'll take it to the publisher. But Caroline, you're brave as hell." I wasn't brave. I was done being silent. Ayr Chapter 6.5. The Preparation. The weeks before publication were a blur of legal reviews, fact-checking, and second-guessing. The publisher's legal team went through every sentence with a fine-toothed comb. They questioned dates, demanded additional documentation, made me sign affidavits confirming the truth of every claim. "This is standard for pieces that name names," the head attorney explained. "We need to make absolutely sure we're not opening ourselves, or you, to litigation." I provided everything they asked for. Bank statements, text message logs extracted from our cell phone carrier, emails from Marcus's account that I'd accessed before he changed the password, calendar entries, credit card receipts. "How did you get all of this?" one paralegal asked, looking through my documentation with something like awe. "I was methodical," I said simply. What I didn't say, I'd been planning this for over a year. Every piece of evidence was deliberately collected, carefully preserved, strategically organized. This wasn't an emotional outburst or a revenge fantasy. This was a calculated exposure of truth. The editor wanted me to soften some sections. The part about the panties. Maybe we don't need quite so much detail about where you found them and how you felt. That stays, I said firmly. The whole point is that women are conditioned to feel shame about evidence of betrayal. To hide the panties, metaphorically and literally. I'm refusing to do that. She backed down. My sister Rachel read the final draft 3 days before publication. "Are you scared?" she asked when she finished. "Terrified." "Good. You should be. This is going to change everything, Caroline. Your life will never be private again." "It hasn't been private since Marcus started the affair. At least this way, I control the narrative." She hugged me tight. "Mom and Dad are going to be proud. And horrified, but mostly proud." I'd told my parents about the article a week earlier. My mother had cried. My father had offered to have a word with Marcus. I declined, though I appreciated the sentiment. "Why now?" my mother had asked. "Why not just move on? You're doing well. You have a good job, a nice apartment. Why revisit all this pain?" "Because other women are going through this right now, Mom. They're finding evidence of affairs and being told they're crazy. They're being gaslit by men who think they're smart enough to get away with it. They need to know they're not alone. They need to know it's okay to speak." She'd nodded slowly. "Your father's mother, your grandmother. She stayed silent about his father's affairs her entire life. It poisoned her, made her bitter and small. I always wondered what would have happened if she'd had the courage to speak. This is for her too, then. The night before publication, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, rereading sections of the article on my phone, second-guessing word choices, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. At 2 a.m., my phone rang. Diane. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Not even close. It's going to be huge, Caroline. We're already getting advance buzz. Other publications want to license excerpts. Morning shows want you for interviews. I haven't even thought about interviews. Start thinking. You're going to be in demand." After we hung up, I made tea and sat by my window, watching the city lights, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The Panties had been the catalyst, but the real story was bigger than that. It was about voice, about refusing to accept someone else's narrative of your life, about documentation as resistance, about speaking truth even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you. Marcus had taken so much from me: the house, the money, years of my life, my trust, my innocence about who I'd married, but he hadn't taken my voice. And tomorrow, the whole world would hear it. Chapter 7. Publication. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. Within an hour, it had been shared 3,000 times. Within 3 hours, it was trending on social media. By evening, it had been picked up by national news outlets. My phone exploded with calls, texts, emails, journalists wanting interviews, women sharing their own stories, people I hadn't spoken to in years reaching out with support, and fury. So much fury directed at Marcus and Julia. The comment sections were brutal. People dissecting every detail of their relationship, calling out Julia's hypocrisy, sharing the article with her firm, her contacts, her family. Someone found the blog post where Julia had condemned affairs. It went viral on its own, paired with screenshots from my article. "How's that integrity working out for you now?" One comment read. Marcus's firm put out a statement. "We are aware of the allegations made in Ms. Peterson's article. We take workplace conduct seriously and are reviewing the matter internally." Corporate speak for, "We're in damage control mode." Julia's social media went dark. She deleted the engagement announcement. Then she deleted her accounts entirely. Marcus tried to reach me, called 15 times in one day, left voicemails ranging from angry to desperate. "How could you do this? How could you air our private business to the world? You've humiliated me, destroyed my reputation. For what? Revenge? Pick up the phone, Caroline. We need to talk about this." I didn't pick up, didn't respond. There was nothing to talk about. I'd said everything I needed to say in the article. My phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Ms. Peterson? This is Rachel Chen from the National Women's Legal Defense Fund. We'd like to talk to you about your story." Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Marcus did sue me for defamation. His lawyers filed papers claiming I'd intentionally misrepresented facts to damage his reputation. My lawyers, provided pro bono by the Women's Legal Defense Fund, responded with every piece of evidence I'd collected: text messages, credit card statements, the Panties, Julia's purchase receipt, everything. Marcus dropped the suit 2 months later. His lawyers must have told him he'd lose. Julia's career imploded. Harrison Financial Group accepted her resignation 3 weeks after the article published. Code 4. We fired her before she could become a bigger liability. She tried to reinvent herself on LinkedIn, rebranding as a business ethics consultant. The comments on her posts were savage. "Didn't you sleep with a married colleague? Interesting choice of specialization. Maybe start with practicing what you preach?" Her engagement to Marcus ended. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she blamed him for not protecting her from the fallout, that he blamed her for being careless enough to leave evidence. Apparently, those Panties had been the beginning of the end for both of them. Marcus lost clients. His firm demoted him quietly. His reputation in the financial community was permanently damaged, not because of the affair. Men in his world had affairs all the time and faced minimal consequences, but because I'd made him look stupid, careless, sloppy. He'd left evidence everywhere. He'd underestimated his wife. He'd gotten caught. In his world, that was unforgivable. My article won journalism awards. I was invited to speak at conferences about ethical reporting, about women finding their voice, about the power of documentation and truth-telling. I wrote a book expanding on the article. It became a bestseller. Publishers wanted more. Readers wanted more. Women everywhere were sending me their stories, tales of betrayal, gaslighting, being told they were crazy when they knew they were right. I started a blog where I could share their stories, a community where women could support each other, share evidence, learn how to document, how to protect themselves. "You've built something incredible," Diane said one day over coffee. "You took your pain and turned it into power, into a platform." "I took my silence and turned it into a voice," I corrected. That too. Chapter 9. The Message. 2 years after the article published, I received a message from Julia. It came through my website's contact form. Subject line: "I'm sorry." I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. "Caroline, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect forgiveness or understanding, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the affair. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry for betraying every principle I claimed to hold. You were right to expose me. I deserved everything that happened. What you probably don't know is that reading your article destroyed me in the best possible way. It forced me to see who I'd become, to confront the hypocrisy I'd been living. I've spent the past 2 years in therapy, working on understanding why I made those choices, why I convinced myself that my wants justified hurting someone else, why I became exactly the person I once despised. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that your voice mattered. Your story mattered. It changed my life, not in the way I deserved to be comfortable, but in the way I needed to grow. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. You deserve both. Malia. I sat with that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her apology float in the void unanswered. But another part of me, the part that had spent 2 years building a community around honesty and healing, recognized something important. This wasn't about Julia earning forgiveness. This was about Julia finally seeing the truth. I responded, "Julia, I appreciate your honesty. I can't say I forgive you. Forgiveness isn't something I owe anyone, but I can say that I hear you. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the act itself. It's the gaslighting that comes with it. The way you're made to feel crazy for trusting your instincts. The way silence is weaponized against you. I hope you've learned that other people's humanity isn't negotiable, that your desires don't justify someone else's pain. That being the other woman makes you complicit in the betrayal, not exempt from responsibility. I hope you use what you've learned to do better. Caroline." She never responded, but I didn't need her to. That exchange wasn't about closure. It was about acknowledgement. Julia had finally admitted what she'd done, had stopped making excuses, had taken responsibility. That was enough. Chapter 10. Moving forward. 3 years after the divorce, I was living a life I'd built entirely on my own terms. I'd written 2 books, started a successful podcast about women reclaiming their narratives, became a sought-after speaker on topics ranging from journalistic ethics to personal empowerment. I dated occasionally. Nothing serious. I wasn't ready for serious. Maybe I'd never be ready again. But I was happy. Genuinely, sustainably happy. My apartment had evolved from temporary shelter to actual home. Plants on the windowsill, books overflowing the shelves, photos of friends and family on the walls. My work fulfilled me. My community supported me. My life felt authentic in ways it never had during my marriage. I still thought about Marcus sometimes, not with anger or longing, but with a strange sort of gratitude. His betrayal had destroyed the life I thought I wanted, but it had also freed me to build the life I actually needed. If he'd been faithful, I would have stayed in that marriage, stayed quiet, stayed small, never found my voice or my purpose. His betrayal was the catalyst for my transformation. The panties, those seemingly insignificant pieces of lace, had become a symbol, not of his affair, but of my decision to speak, to document, to expose, to refuse to be silenced by shame or fear, or the expectation that women should accept betrayal quietly. I received messages daily from women in similar situations, women who'd found evidence of affairs, Women whose husbands had lied and manipulated and gaslit them. Some of them chose to speak out. Some chose to divorce quietly. Some chose to stay and rebuild. I never judged their choices. Everyone's path is different. But I always told them the same thing. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Your silence is not weakness, but neither is your voice. Choose the path that gives you power over your own story. Author Chapter 11. The Reunion. 5 years after our divorce, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. I almost didn't recognize him. He'd aged, not badly but noticeably. More gray in his hair, lines around his eyes, a heaviness in his posture that hadn't been there before. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, I thought he might leave, but instead he walked over. Caroline. Marcus, do you have a minute? I considered saying no, but curiosity won. Sure. We sat at a corner table. Awkward silence stretched between us. I read your second book, he finally said. Oh? It was good. Painful to read, but good. That was kind of the point. I know. He stirred his coffee without drinking it. I've wanted to talk to you for years, to apologize, but I didn't think you'd want to hear it. I'm not sure I do now. I know, but I need to say it anyway. He looked at me directly for the first time. I'm sorry. For the affair. For the lies. For making you feel like you were crazy when you were right all along. For taking everything in the divorce and thinking I'd won. You did win. You got the house, the investments, everything you wanted. I got things. I lost everything that mattered. And what was that? My reputation. My career trajectory. My relationship with Julia. Turned out we had nothing in common except secrecy and selfishness. My self-respect. My sleep. He smiled bitterly. You destroyed me in that article. Completely and deservedly destroyed me. Good. He laughed, surprised. Yeah, good. I needed to be destroyed. The person I was, the person who could cheat on you, gaslight you, steal from you, that person needed to be obliterated. And now? Now I'm trying to be better. I'm in therapy. I'm working a job that pays half what I used to make but doesn't require me to compromise my ethics. I'm learning to be honest. It's harder than I thought. Being honest is always harder than lying. Lies are easier in the moment, but they compound, become impossible to maintain. He paused. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you, what it cost you, and what it says about me that I was capable of it. I studied him. He seemed genuine, but then again, he'd seemed genuine our entire marriage. Marcus, I appreciate the apology, but I need you to understand something. I didn't expose you for revenge. I exposed you because silence was killing me, because I was tired of carrying your shame, because other women needed to know they weren't alone. I know. Do you? Because you're sitting here talking about what you lost, what it cost you. But this was never about you. It was about me finding my voice, me refusing to be erased by your betrayal. He nodded slowly. You're right. I'm still making it about me. Even my apology is self-centered. Yes, it is. I'm working on that too. Being less self-centered. It's a process. I finished my coffee. I have to go. I have a podcast to record. I listen to it sometimes. Your podcast. It's good. Important. Thank you. I stood to leave. He stood too. Caroline, one more thing. Yes? Thank you. For exposing me. I needed it. And I think you saved me from becoming someone even worse. I didn't do it for you, Marcus. I did it for me. I know, but still, thank you. I nodded and walked away. Arthur Epilogue. The Voice. 6 years after finding those panties in my linen closet, I stood on a stage in front of 500 women at a conference on women's empowerment. The venue was a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. The organizers had set up rows of chairs facing a simple stage with a podium and a large screen behind it. Every seat was filled. Women stood along the back wall. Some sat cross-legged on the floor near the front. All of them had come to hear my story. My speech was titled, From Silence to Voice, How I Turned Betrayal into Purpose. I'd given versions of this talk dozens of times over the past 5 years. At universities, at women's conferences, at journalism symposiums, at support groups for divorced women. But it never got easier. Every time I had to relive the hardest moments of my life in front of strangers, had to show my pain, my anger, my vulnerability. Every time it was worth it. I stepped up to the podium. The room fell silent. "Good morning," I said. "My name is Caroline Peterson, and 6 years ago, I found a pair of black lace panties in my linen closet that weren't mine." A ripple of recognition moved through the audience. Many of them had read the article. Some had read my books. They knew this story, but I told it anyway, from the beginning. I told them about my marriage, about the slow realization that something was wrong, about being gaslit, being told I was imagining things, being made to feel crazy for trusting my instincts. I told them about the documentation, about the notebook I kept in a safety deposit box, about gathering evidence while maintaining the facade of the oblivious wife. I clicked to the first slide on the screen behind me, a photo of my notebook, its pages filled with dates and notes and highlighted passages. "This," I said, "is what resistance looks like. Not loud, not dramatic, just methodical, patient, strategic." I told them about the divorce, about Marcus taking everything and thinking he'd won, about me accepting his terms because I was building something bigger. Then I clicked to the next slide, a photo of those black lace panties, carefully staged against a white background. The room collectively inhaled. "This," I said, holding the moment, "is where it all started. Not the betrayal. That had been happening for months. But my voice, my decision to speak, to refuse to carry someone else's shame." I told them about finding the panties, about photographing them, about tracking down the boutique receipt, about adding them to my growing collection of evidence. "These panties were supposed to humiliate me," I said, "to make me feel inadequate, to keep me silent out of embarrassment. Instead, they became evidence, proof, the foundation of a story that changed my life and touched thousands of others." I clicked to the next slide, screenshots of my article's opening paragraphs. "Because here's what people like my ex-husband never understand. Silence is not weakness. Silence can be strategic. Silence can be powerful. But so is speaking. So is refusing to be erased. So is telling the truth in your own words, in your own way, in your own time." I told them about writing the article, about the year of preparation, about the legal reviews and fact-checking and sleepless nights wondering if I was making the right choice. I was terrified, I admitted. I knew once I published that article, my life would never be private again. I knew Marcus would come after me. I knew people would judge me, criticize me, call me vindictive and bitter. But I also knew that staying silent was killing me, that carrying his shame was poisoning me, that other women needed to hear this story so they'd know they weren't alone. I clicked through more slides, screenshots of comments from readers, messages from women sharing their own stories, photos from speaking events and book signings. My husband betrayed me. He took everything in the divorce. He thought he'd won. What he never understood was that his greatest mistake wasn't the betrayal itself. It was underestimating my voice. He thought I'd stay silent out of shame, out of fear, out of the conditioning that tells women to protect men's reputations at the cost of their own truth. He was wrong. I paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. Some were crying. Some were nodding. Some looked angry on my behalf. And I want you to know, if you're sitting in this audience holding on to a secret that's poisoning you, carrying shame that belongs to someone else, staying quiet because you think that's what you're supposed to do, I want you to know that your voice matters. You don't have to shout. You don't have to write an exposé or publish an article or go viral. But you also can if you want to, if that's what you need. Your story is yours to tell. Your truth is yours to speak. Your silence and your voice are both yours to choose. The power is in knowing you have options, that you're not trapped, that you can document, you can speak, you can expose, you can reclaim. I clicked to the final slide, a close-up of those black lace panties. Those panties tried to shame me into silence. Instead, they gave me a voice that echoed around the world. And nobody, not my ex-husband, not his mistress, not anyone, gets to take that away from me. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Applause so loud it felt physical. Women crying openly, cheering. Some raising their fists in solidarity. I stood there, letting it wash over me. 6 years ago, I'd been a woman finding evidence of betrayal in her linen closet, wondering if she was crazy, feeling ashamed and small. Now I was here, speaking to hundreds, inspiring thousands, building a movement around the simple idea that women deserve to be heard. The transformation was almost incomprehensible. After the speech, dozens of women approached me. A line formed, stretching to the back of the venue. Each woman had a story. I found texts on my husband's phone. My boyfriend is gaslighting me about charges on our credit card. I know he's cheating, but everyone tells me I'm paranoid. I listened to everyone, validated every story, reminded them that their instincts were probably right, their feelings were valid, their voices mattered. A woman in her 60s with silver hair approached near the end. I stayed silent for 40 years, she said. 40 years of knowing my husband was unfaithful, of carrying that shame, of pretending everything was fine. I'm 70 now, divorced finally, but I lost so much time. She took my hand. Thank you for being brave enough to speak, for showing my granddaughter's generation that they don't have to accept what my generation did. I hugged her, both of us crying. This was why I'd exposed Marcus, not for revenge, though that had been sweet in the moment, but for this, for connection, for healing, for breaking cycles. That evening, back in my hotel room, I scrolled through social media. The speech had already been clipped and shared. Dye your black lace panties was trending. Women posting photos of their own evidence, sharing their own stories, using my symbol to speak their truths. Some were literal, photos of underwear, receipts, text messages. Others were metaphorical. My black lace panties were the lie about working late. My black lace panties were the smell of perfume I didn't wear. It had become bigger than me, bigger than my story. It had become a movement. My phone rang. Marcus's number. I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but curiosity won. I saw your speech, he said without preamble. It's online everywhere. I know. You're still doing this, still telling our story to anyone who'll listen. It's my story, Marcus, not ours. And people aren't just listening. They're sharing their own stories, building community, healing, at my expense, at the expense of the truth, which you tried very hard to hide. He was quiet for a long moment. Do you enjoy it? The revenge? It's not revenge anymore. Maybe it was, at first. But now? Now it's purpose. Now it's helping people. Now it's something bigger than you or me or those damn panties. I'll never escape it, you know. Every time someone Googles my name, your article comes up. Every job interview, every first date, every new client. Your words follow me everywhere. Good. Maybe next time you'll think twice before betraying someone. Next time. He laughed bitterly. There won't be a next time. Julia left me 2 years ago. Said she couldn't handle the scrutiny, the constant reminder of how we started. I'm alone, Caroline. Completely alone. I felt a flicker of something. Not quite sympathy, but not satisfaction either. I'm sorry you're alone, Marcus, but that's not my fault. That's the consequence of your choices. You chose the affair, you chose the lies, you chose to take everything in the divorce, you chose to underestimate my voice. I know, he sighed. I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did, what it cost. Not just what it cost me, but what it cost you. And I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. Thank you for saying that. But I need you to understand something. Your apology doesn't erase anything, doesn't change the past, doesn't make my story less true. I know. And I'm going to keep telling it. Not to punish you, but because it matters. Because other women need to hear it. Because silence protects predators and gaslighters and men who think they can get away with anything. I understand. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my hotel room, processing the conversation. Marcus was sorry. Maybe he even meant it. But sorry doesn't undo betrayal. Doesn't give back the years I lost. Doesn't erase the gaslighting or the manipulation or the calculated cruelty of taking everything in the divorce while having an affair. Sorry is just a word. My voice is a legacy. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new document, my third book, still in progress. This one about the aftermath of speaking up, the good, the bad, the complicated, about how revenge transforms into purpose, how anger becomes fuel for change, how one woman's story becomes a catalyst for thousands to find their own voices, about how those black lace panties, meant to shame and silence, became the most powerful symbol of my life. I wrote until dawn, the words flowing fast and true. Outside my window, the city woke up. Another day. Another chance to speak truth. Marcus thought he'd taken everything. Instead, he'd given me everything that mattered. A voice, a purpose, a community, a legacy. And those panties, ridiculous, insignificant, meant to humiliate, had become the thread that connected thousands of women's stories. The thread that, when pulled, unraveled not just Marcus's lies, but the entire cultural narrative that women should stay silent about betrayal. I'd spent years being quiet, playing the good wife, protecting his reputation, carrying his shame. Never again. Now I spoke, loudly, clearly, without apology, and the world, finally, was listening. The end. This story is dedicated to every woman who has ever been told she was imagining things when she knew she was seeing the truth. To every woman who found evidence and wondered if she was crazy. To every woman who stayed silent because she didn't know she had other options. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Your silence, while sometimes necessary for survival, is never your only option. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Build your case. And when you're ready, if you're ready, speak. The world is listening, and we believe you.